Imagine waking up tomorrow with the same mind you've carried for years, the same doubts, the same fears, the same invisible voice reminding you of every failure, every mistake, every reason you should hesitate. Most people believe their greatest enemy is somewhere outside them, a jealous rival, a difficult boss, a world that refuses to give them a chance. But they are wrong. The greatest enemy lives behind their own eyes. It speaks every single day, shaping every decision long before reality has a chance to respond. If you lose the conversation inside your mind, you will lose every battle outside of it. Here's what most people never realize. Your mind doesn't distinguish between truth and repetition. Whatever you tell yourself often enough becomes your identity. Whisper weakness to yourself every morning, and your body will obey. Repeat fear often enough, and your actions will shrink to fit it. But reverse the process, and something extraordinary begins to happen. The same mind that once imprisoned you becomes the weapon that frees you. Confidence is not something you find. It is something you rehearse until it becomes impossible to fake. For the next few minutes, I want you to challenge everything you've been saying to yourself, because the words echoing inside your head are either building your future or quietly destroying it. You don't need years of therapy. You don't need perfect circumstances. You don't need anyone's permission. What you need is a different internal script, one so powerful that it rewires the way you think, act, and respond to every obstacle standing in your way. Today, I'm going to show you how talking to yourself differently for just 3 days can be changing the direction of your life. Not through empty positivity or motivational cliches, but through deliberate psychological conditioning that reshapes your identity from the inside out. If you're willing to stay until the end and apply what you're about to hear, you may never speak to yourself the same way again. Every action you take begins with a conversation that no one else can hear. Before you speak to another person, you speak to yourself. Before you make a decision, your mind has already whispered an opinion about whether you are capable or not. Before you step into an opportunity, there is a quiet voice that either pushes you forward or pulls you back. Most people never pay attention to this voice because it has been with them for so long that it feels like reality. They assume their thoughts are facts. They believe every doubt deserves attention, every fear deserves respect, and every criticism deserves to become part of their identity. This is the first mistake that keeps people trapped for years. The mind is constantly collecting evidence to support whatever you repeatedly tell it. If your internal dialogue is filled with statements like, I'm not good enough, people are better than me, or I always fail, your brain begins filtering the world through those beliefs. Suddenly, every rejection feels like proof. Every mistake becomes confirmation. Every setback strengthens the identity you've unconsciously created. You are no longer living according to your potential. You are living according to the story you repeat inside your head. Most people spend their lives trying to change their circumstances while ignoring the voice creating those circumstances. They believe a promotion will make them confident. They think more money will make them feel secure. They assume success will erase insecurity, but confidence is never the reward at the end of the journey. Confidence is the mindset that allows the journey to begin. The external world rarely changes the internal one. The internal world almost always changes the external one. Think about the most disciplined people you admire. They are not free from fear. They are not immune to uncertainty. They simply refuse to let their emotions become their commands. Their internal dialogue is different. When challenges appear, they don't say, I can't do this. They ask, how do I figure this out? When they fail, they don't announce that they are failures. They tell themselves they have gathered information. That small difference in language creates a massive difference in identity. Language is not merely communication, it is programming. Every word you repeat becomes a command your subconscious attempts to follow. If you constantly call yourself lazy, your brain begins acting in ways that protect that label. If you repeatedly say you're unlucky, you stop noticing opportunities because your identity has already decided they don't belong to you. Your subconscious has one primary goal: remain consistent with the person you believe yourself to be. It doesn't care whether that identity makes you miserable or successful. It only cares about keeping the story alive. Imagine planting two different seeds in identical soil. One receives sunlight, water, and care every single day. The other receives neglect and poison. After months, one grows into a strong tree while the other struggles to survive. Your mind works exactly the same way. Every sentence you feed yourself is either nourishment or poison. There is no neutral conversation happening inside your head. Every thought is moving you toward strength or toward weakness. The dangerous part is that negative self-talk often disguises itself as honesty. People proudly say, "I'm just being realistic." But realism without possibility becomes surrender. They convince themselves that lowering expectations protects them from disappointment. In reality, it protects them from growth. The mind interprets repeated limitations as instructions. It doesn't argue, it obeys. Consider how children develop confidence. They aren't born believing they are incapable. Their identity is shaped by repetition. If a child repeatedly hears encouragement, belief begins to grow. If that same child constantly hears criticism, limitation becomes familiar. As adults, something remarkable happens. We become both the teacher and the student. Every day we are educating ourselves with our own words. The question is whether we are creating strength or reinforcing weakness. This is why elite performers guard their internal dialogue so carefully. Athletes don't wait until they win before speaking confidently. Leaders don't wait until everyone believes in them before believing in themselves. They understand that performance follows identity. They rehearse victory internally long before it appears externally. Their self-talk prepares their nervous system for the pressure that others collapse under. You don't become confident by pretending challenges don't exist. You become confident by changing the meaning you assign to those challenges. Instead of telling yourself that difficulty is evidence you are incapable, you begin telling yourself that difficulty is proof you are growing. Instead of seeing obstacles as warnings to stop, you interpret them as invitations to become stronger. The obstacle itself hasn't changed. Only the conversation surrounding it has. Notice how easily people compliment others while attacking themselves. They encourage friends after failure, but punish themselves for the same mistake. They offer patience to strangers while showing cruelty toward their own minds. Imagine if someone followed you around every day saying the exact words you tell yourself. Would you consider that person supportive? Or would you call them your greatest enemy? The truth is, many people carry that enemy within them every waking moment. Your identity is built sentence by sentence. Every morning, you either reinforce who you've been or begin constructing who you're becoming. Small statements seem harmless because they are quiet, but repeated often enough, they become permanent architecture. A single thought means very little. A thought repeated hundreds of times becomes belief. A belief repeated through action becomes identity. Identity repeated over years becomes destiny. This is why changing your life rarely begins with changing your schedule. It begins with changing your script. The words inside your head determine how much effort you give, how long you persist, how quickly you recover, and how boldly you act. If the script says you're powerless, every action becomes smaller. If the script says you're capable of adapting, learning, and enduring, your behavior begins matching those expectations. Your brain is always listening. It never takes a day off. It hears every complaint, every excuse, every declaration of weakness. and quietly organizes your behavior around those commands. It also hears every declaration of resilience, every commitment to improve, every refusal to surrender. The subconscious doesn't stop to question whether your words are deserved. It simply accepts repetition as truth. That means every morning offers a choice. You can continue repeating the same phrases that have produced the same results for years, or you can begin speaking with the authority of the person you intend to become, not because you're lying to yourself, but because you're training yourself. Identity is never discovered by accident. It is deliberately constructed through repeated thought, repeated language, and repeated action. The conversation inside your mind is shaping the person you will become tomorrow, whether you are aware of it or not. Most people underestimate what can happen in 3 days because they overestimate dramatic change and underestimate consistent repetition. They believe transformation requires months, years, or a life-changing event. They wait for motivation to strike, for confidence to magically appear, or for circumstances to improve before changing the way they think. But the human mind does not change because of time alone. It changes because of repeated instruction. If you feed your mind the same message with enough consistency, it begins treating that message as reality. 3 days may not completely transform your life, but 3 days are enough to begin transforming the direction of your mind. Your brain is constantly adapting. Every thought you repeat strengthens certain mental pathways while allowing others to weaken. This is why habits become automatic. It is also why negative thinking becomes so difficult to escape. The more often you tell yourself that you're weak, the stronger that pathway becomes. The more often you convince yourself that success belongs to other people, the easier it becomes to believe that lie. Every repeated sentence becomes another layer of programming. Imagine walking across a grassy field for the first time. There is no visible path. But if you walk across the exact same route every day, the grass begins to flatten. Eventually, a trail appears that is easier to follow than any other direction. Your thoughts operate in exactly the same way. The mind always chooses the path it has traveled the most. If your internal dialogue has followed the path of fear for years, fear becomes your default response. If your thoughts repeatedly travel the path of courage, discipline, and certainty, those qualities slowly become natural. This is why changing your self-talk is not about pretending. It is about creating a new path before the old one decides your future. During these 3 days, your goal is not to convince yourself that life is easy. Your goal is to stop speaking like someone who has already accepted defeat. Every time your mind says, I can't, you interrupt it. Every time it says, I'm not ready, you replace it with, I'll become ready by taking action. Every time it whispers, what if I fail? You answer with, then I'll learn something no success could have taught me. The first day will feel uncomfortable because your mind prefers familiarity over improvement. It doesn't care if your habits are harmful, it only cares that they are familiar. When you begin changing your internal dialogue, your brain resists because it believes the old identity keeps you safe. That discomfort is not evidence that you're doing something wrong. It is evidence that the old programming is being challenged. Many people quit during this stage because they mistake resistance for failure. They assume that because negative thoughts still appear, nothing is changing. But transformation is not the absence of negative thoughts. Transformation is your decision to stop obeying them. The thoughts may continue arriving, but you no longer invite them to stay. You observe them, challenge them, and replace them before they become beliefs. On the second day, something subtle begins to happen. You start noticing how frequently you criticize yourself. You become aware of patterns that were previously invisible. You realize that your mind has been repeating the same script for years without your permission. This awareness is powerful because you cannot change what you refuse to notice. Once you recognize the pattern, you begin interrupting it before it gains momentum. You also notice how your posture changes when your internal dialogue changes. The body responds to the language of the mind. Speak like someone defeated and your shoulders naturally lower. Walk like someone expecting rejection and your movements become hesitant. But when your internal dialogue becomes stronger, your body unconsciously follows. You stand taller, you breathe deeper, you make decisions faster. Other people may not know what changed, but they begin responding differently because your presence communicates certainty. This is why elite performers rehearse mentally before they perform physically. They understand that the mind prepares the body long before action begins. They don't wait until they feel fearless. They repeatedly speak to themselves in ways that make fear less influential. Their confidence is not accidental, it is practiced. One of the most effective changes you can make during these 3 days is replacing identity-based weakness with identity-based strength. Stop saying, I'm trying to become disciplined. Instead, tell yourself, I am becoming someone who keeps promises to myself. Stop saying, I hope I become confident. Instead, say, I act confidently even while I'm still growing. These small changes matter because your subconscious responds more powerfully to identity than to temporary emotion. People often focus on outcomes while ignoring identity. They say they want success, but they continue speaking like failures. They want respect, but they constantly disrespect themselves. They want courage, but every sentence they repeat reinforces hesitation. Your words either support your future or sabotage it. There is no middle ground. By the third day, the conversations inside your mind begin slowing down, not because they disappear, but because you have interrupted them so many times that they lose some of their authority. The voice that once sounded absolute now sounds questionable. Instead of automatically believing every negative thought, you begin asking whether it deserves your attention. That question alone creates distance between you and your old identity. Your mind starts expecting different responses from you. When difficulty appears, instead of immediately saying, this is impossible, another voice quietly answers, let's find another way. When fear appears before an opportunity, you no longer assume fear means stop. You begin understanding that fear often appears whenever growth is close. The purpose of these 3 days is not perfection. You will still make mistakes. You will still experience doubt. You will still have moments when your old thinking tries to return. The difference is that you now recognize those thoughts as habits instead of facts. Habits can be changed. Facts cannot. You also begin noticing how much energy you've wasted arguing against yourself. Every hour spent convincing yourself that you're incapable is an hour stolen from meaningful action. The strongest people are not those with the fewest fears. They are those who spend the least amount of time negotiating with fear. They make decisions before doubt has the chance to become comfortable. Another powerful shift happens when you stop asking whether you believe the new words immediately. Belief follows repetition. A musician doesn't expect mastery after one practice session. An athlete doesn't expect greatness after one workout. Yet people expect one positive thought to erase years of negative conditioning. The brain doesn't work that way. It rewards consistency, not intensity. This is why you commit to the process, even when it feels unnatural. Every repetition strengthens the new pathway. Every interruption weakens the old one. Every encouraging sentence becomes another vote for the person you are becoming. Identity is built through accumulation, not through a single emotional breakthrough. As these 3 days continue, your actions begin reflecting your new internal dialogue. You hesitate less before speaking. You recover faster after mistakes. You become less interested in proving yourself to others because you have started proving something to yourself. You no longer wait for external approval before taking action. You begin trusting your ability to adapt instead of demanding certainty before every step. People around you may not understand what has changed. They may simply notice that you seem calmer under pressure, more decisive during uncertainty, and less affected by criticism. What they are witnessing is not a miracle. They are witnessing the visible effects of invisible repetition. Long before your behavior changed, your words changed. Long before your confidence became noticeable, your internal dialogue became intentional. Every sentence you repeated during those 3 days quietly reshaped the foundation on which every future decision would be built. There's a version of you that already exists, not in the world, but in your mind. This version is calm under pressure, disciplined when others quit, confident without needing applause, and focused without being distracted by opinions. The tragedy is that most people never allow this version of themselves to emerge because they continue speaking to themselves as if they are permanently trapped by who they used to be. They keep introducing themselves to the world through yesterday's failures instead of tomorrow's potential. Identity is not created by your past. It is created by what you repeatedly believe about yourself today. The world responds to the image you project, but that image is first created by the conversation happening inside your mind. If you secretly believe you deserve less, you will unknowingly settle for less. If you secretly believe you are incapable, you will hesitate at the exact moment courage is required. Your actions are rarely disconnected from your self-image. They follow it with astonishing accuracy. That is why changing your life without changing your identity is almost impossible. Most people wait for evidence before believing in themselves. They tell themselves, once I become successful, I'll feel confident. Once I make money, I'll believe I'm valuable. Once people respect me, I'll respect myself. This way of thinking keeps them trapped because confidence is not a reward handed to those who achieve greatness. Confidence is the mindset that allows greatness to become possible. You cannot expect your future to validate an identity you refuse to adopt today. Every extraordinary achievement begins as an invisible decision. Before anyone else notices the transformation, the individual has already changed the way they speak to themselves. Long before the world calls someone disciplined, that person has been repeating promises internally and keeping them consistently. Long before someone is admired for courage, they have been choosing action while fear still exists. Identity always changes before reputation does. Think about the strongest oak tree standing in a storm. People admire its branches because they can see them. What they cannot see are the roots extending deep into the ground. Those roots determine whether the tree survives the wind. Your identity is your root system. Success, confidence, wealth, and influence are simply the branches. Most people spend their lives decorating the branches while neglecting the roots. Then they wonder why the smallest storm knocks everything down. Your internal dialogue determines the strength of those roots. If you repeatedly tell yourself that pressure destroys you, every challenge becomes overwhelming. If you repeatedly remind yourself that pressure reveals your strength, your mind begins preparing itself differently. The challenge has not changed, only your interpretation has. Yet that interpretation changes everything. One of the greatest psychological shifts you can make is learning to speak from the identity you are building rather than the emotions you are currently feeling. Emotions are temporary. Identity is enduring. There will be mornings when you feel tired, uncertain, or discouraged. If you only act according to emotion, your life becomes unpredictable. But if you act according to identity, consistency replaces chaos. Imagine waking up on a difficult morning. Your emotions whisper that you should stay comfortable, avoid discomfort, and postpone your goals. If your identity is weak, those emotions become commands. But if your identity is strong, you respond differently. You tell yourself, I am someone who does what needs to be done regardless of how I feel. Suddenly, Your emotions lose their authority because they are no longer deciding your actions. This is why disciplined people appear almost unstoppable. They are not stronger because they possess superhuman willpower. They are stronger because they have stopped negotiating with temporary feelings. Their identity has become more powerful than their emotions. They don't ask themselves whether they feel like doing the work. They remind themselves who they are becoming. The same principle applies to criticism. Most people allow the opinions of strangers to rewrite the story they tell themselves. One negative comment outweighs 10 compliments because their identity depends on external approval. But when your identity is built internally, criticism becomes information instead of destruction. You listen without collapsing, you evaluate without becoming defensive, you improve without questioning your worth. Notice how people who constantly seek validation rarely feel secure. No amount of praise is enough because their confidence belongs to other people. If applause disappears, so does their certainty. But the person whose identity has been built through intentional self-talk carries confidence into every room, even when nobody is cheering. Their belief is not borrowed. It is earned through countless private conversations where they chose growth over self-doubt. Another mistake people make is believing they must eliminate fear before acting. Fear has never disappeared for anyone attempting something meaningful. The difference is not whether fear exists. The difference is who has the louder voice. If fear dominates your internal dialogue, hesitation becomes your lifestyle. If purpose dominates your internal dialogue, fear becomes background noise. Every successful person has experienced moments where the mind suggested quitting. The difference lies in the response. Average people treat those thoughts as instructions. Exceptional people treat them as suggestions. They hear the voice of doubt, acknowledge its presence, and continue moving anyway. They understand that thoughts are visitors, not rulers. When you begin talking to yourself like the strongest version of yourself, something fascinating happens. Your standards begin rising naturally. You stop accepting excuses that once sounded reasonable. You become uncomfortable with mediocrity because it no longer matches your identity. You begin protecting your time because you recognize its value. You choose better habits because they align with the person you are becoming. This transformation is rarely dramatic. It happens quietly, one decision at a time, one sentence at a time, one promise kept at a time. People searching for instant breakthroughs often overlook these subtle changes because they expect lightning instead of sunrise. But sunrise changes the entire world without making a sound. As your identity strengthens, resilience follows. Failure stops feeling personal because you no longer confuse temporary outcomes with permanent identity. You stop saying, I failed, therefore I am a failure. Instead, you tell yourself, this result teaches me what to improve. That shift allows you to recover faster than people who allow every setback to define them. Resilience is not pretending pain doesn't exist. It is refusing to let pain become your identity. Strong people experience disappointment just like everyone else. They simply refuse to build a home there. They process the emotion, extract the lesson, and continue moving. Their internal dialogue consistently points them toward progress instead of self-pity. The remarkable thing about identity is that it influences every area of your life simultaneously. When you believe you are someone who honors commitments, you become more disciplined with your work. You become more reliable in relationships. You take better care of your health. You stop making decisions that contradict the image you have intentionally built. One internal shift begins creating external consistency. This is why changing the way you speak to yourself is one of the most powerful investments you can make. Every encouraging sentence becomes another brick in the foundation of your future. Every disciplined action confirms the identity you have chosen. Every courageous decision strengthens your belief that you are capable of handling more than you once imagined. Eventually, you stop pretending to be strong because strength has become familiar. You stop chasing confidence because confidence has become your natural response. You stop asking permission to pursue your goals because your identity no longer depends on the approval of others. The person you once admired from a distance gradually becomes the person staring back at you in the mirror, shaped not by luck, talent, or perfect circumstances, but by thousands of deliberate conversations that taught your mind exactly who you had decided to become.